The term Harlem Renaissance is somewhat ironic. Harlem was always socially and culturally interesting to the black people who lived north of 125th Street. What Harlem Renaissance really meant was that white people discovered Harlem. And the foremost interpreter of Harlem to white American was Carl Van Vechten, portrayed here in this great picture by his friend and fellow artist Romaine Brooks. Harlem was the place where you could go to get a drink during Prohibition. It was imperfectly policed by a city that was largely indifferent to African Americans as long as they kept quiet. In other words, African Americans were always outlaws, so Harlem was a transgressive space, one where you could go get a drink, go to a saloon, go to a club, listen to Louis Armstrong, dance the Black Bottom, and celebrate the street and cultural life of Harlem, which included drag balls, curiously enough, which were tremendously popular and reported in the popular press, as well as in the bohemian circles of Harlem. And Van Vechten is an interesting person because on the one hand he had a genuine affection and love for African American culture, but there's something a little bit odd, something even a little bit off-putting about this discovery of Harlem by white Americans and by white intellectuals like Van Vechten. And you can see it in this painting by Brooks, where Van Vechten went north in a sense because he was escaping from the buttoned-down life of lower Manhattan to what he saw and what he interpreted as the more natural, primitive, sexually permissive society of Harlem. And this is the beginning of a kind of romantic racism in which blacks were seen as more natural, they were seen as more primitive, more earthy, and yes, more sexual. And in this painting by Brooks, and it was a gesture of friendship when she presented it to him, and I actually wonder how the friendship survived, because if you notice, if you look into the background, the icy white figure of Van Vechten with his white suit and his Nordic pallor, his white hair, but coated into the background are the heads of 5 young black men against this grid work which exists in this strange suspension of space, seeming to come out of the seat in which Van Vechten is sitting. And what I want to suggest is the way in which that grid work is not simply a skyscraper, it's not a cityscape, but it exemplifies in Brooks's painting the kind of iron cages of race, the division between white and black, and to an extent the role of Van Vechten as an exploiter of black American. And a very off-putting touch to me is in his right hand you see the opera glasses, connoting his position as a voyeur, a position who is in a sense exploiting the people that in many ways he celebrated. This painting was given to Van Vechten by Brooks as a gesture of friendship, and I find it actually hard to believe that their friendship would survive a painting which is in many ways so wicked about the divided legacy of Carl Van Vechten. On the one hand, his great cultural achievements in bringing forward the work of many African American artists and writers, but also the element of exploitation as he went north to colonize a world that was unknown to white America.